As the evening twilight embraced the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City during its gala weekend, Elizabeth Collins gazed around the venue with a satisfied sigh. Her curated exhibition, A Dialogue Between Ancient and Modern, had finally opened, and prominent figures from the art world were approaching her one after another with words of congratulation. Elizabeth had steadily built her career as a museum curator over the past decade. Dressed in a black silk gown, her composed demeanor commanded respect from those around her. Her colleague Jennifer approached her with a champagne glass in hand. "Liz, this is a marvelous success. This exhibition will be the highlight of the year," she said with a smile. "Thank you," Liz smiled back. "This project has finally come to fruition after 3 years of planning." Jennifer hesitated slightly before asking, "By the way, when is your sister's wedding?" Liz's expression clouded momentarily. "Next month," she answered briefly before quickly changing the subject. She was lying. The truth was, she didn't know the details herself. The relationship between the Collins sisters, Liz and Rebecca, was complicated. Becky was a successful real estate agent specializing in prime Manhattan properties. With her flashy personality and sociable nature, Becky always loved being the center of attention. Meanwhile, Liz was introverted, valuing deep conversations and art over showiness. Their parents, Martha and Harold, were enjoying a comfortable retirement in an elegant neighborhood in Connecticut. Harold had found success in investment banking, while Martha was prominent in society circles, deeply involved in local charity work. Anyone looking at their family photos would see the image of a perfect family. However, beneath those smiles worked an invisible dynamic. From childhood, the parents had treated Becky as special. Her vivacity, sociability, and occasional vulnerability triggered their protective instincts. Meanwhile, Liz was labeled the irresponsible one, the independent child, and rarely received the same expressions of affection. "Liz is smart, she'll be fine," Martha would often say. "But Becky needs our help." Those words never changed, not when Liz was honored as a high school valedictorian, not when her graduate research received international recognition, not when she was first promoted to curator. Her success was expected, Becky's smallest progress was to be celebrated extravagantly. Liz also didn't have much expected of her romantic life. She had focused on studies during her school years and prioritized her career during her formative professional period. She had dated several men before her early 30s, but never met anyone who truly understood her inner self. While her parents pretended to worry about her single status, they seemed to have resigned themselves to the idea that marriage wasn't for Liz. On the other hand, Becky's romantic history was always the family's focus. With each breakup, her parents spared no comforting words or financial assistance. Then 7 months ago, Becky had announced her engagement with much fanfare. Her fiancé was Jason Foster, an investment banker described as sociable, charming, and from a wonderful family. When Liz first met Jason at the engagement party, she felt an odd sense of discomfort. His smile, his way of speaking, and especially the way he looked at her gave her the impression of calculation. "He seems familiar somehow," Liz thought, but couldn't connect the sensation to a specific memory. "If my sister is happy, that's all that matters," she told herself, suppressing her uneasiness about Jason. However, that slight discomfort would eventually lead to a discovery that would fundamentally overturn her life and family relationships. As the gala drew to a close, Liz checked her smartphone. There were no messages from her parents or Becky. No words congratulating her exhibition's success, just silence. This wasn't unusual for Liz, but tonight was supposed to be special. She finished her remaining champagne and prepared to return to her everyday routine. One Thursday evening, a week after the exhibition's successful opening, Liz finally settled comfortably on her sofa with a glass of red wine beside her. She casually opened Instagram, which she hadn't checked for a long time, and began scrolling. Suddenly, her finger stopped. A photo posted by her friend Sophia with the hashtag #CollinsForsterWedding, filled the screen. A church adorned with white flowers, a champagne tower, and Becky and Jason standing in the center. Becky was wrapped in a pristine white designer dress, radiating happiness. Liz checked the date in confusion. The photo had been posted last Saturday, the very day she had been busy with the museum's gala event. She quickly began checking other photos. The venue decorations, the lavish cake, people gathering on the dance floor. Her parents' smiling faces were there too. Martha in a designer dress, Harold standing proudly in a new tuxedo. Then reality hit her hard. Her sister's wedding had taken place, and she hadn't been invited. This must be some mistake, Liz told herself. Perhaps she had lost the invitation. Or maybe they didn't know her new address. But she had been living in the same apartment for 3 years. Her parents and sister knew her address perfectly well. With trembling hands, Liz dialed her mother's number. The call continued, but there was no answer. Her father's number yielded the same result. Finally, she tried Becky's number, but it immediately went to voicemail. Liz put down her smartphone and stared again at the Instagram photos. Everyone in the pictures looked like they were having a wonderful time. They showed no sign of missing her presence. Throughout the weekend, Liz repeatedly sent messages and made calls, but there was no response from her family. On Monday, she tried to focus on work, but her heartache only grew. By Wednesday afternoon, Liz had made a decision. She would visit her parents' home in Connecticut. She requested Friday off from her boss and set out by car on Thursday evening. She arrived at her parents' house just after 7 p.m. The familiar white 3-story house looked unchanged from the outside. However, the moment she entered, Liz felt that something significant had changed. A large wedding photo hung in the entryway, Becky and Jason holding hands before the altar. And in the corner of the photo stood her parents, looking proud. Without her. Martha came out of the living room in surprise. "What brings you here? You should have called ahead." Liz took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. "It seems Becky's wedding took place. Why wasn't I informed?" Martha was momentarily speechless, then shrugged. "Oh, that was just a change of plans. We had to move it up suddenly because of Jason's schedule. We wanted to let you know, but weren't you busy as usual?" "That's a lie," Liz said, controlling her trembling hands. "You knew about my exhibition long in advance. But I wasn't even invited." "Why?" At this moment, Harold appeared from the living room. His face showed confusion. "Elizabeth, what brings you here so suddenly?" "Dad, why wasn't I invited to Becky's wedding?" Liz repeated her question, looking alternately at both parents. A heavy silence filled the room. Martha and Harold exchanged glances, communicating something to each other. Finally, Martha sighed. "I'll be honest. As a single woman, it didn't concern you, did it? We didn't invite you because it would have been embarrassing." Those words were like a knife in Liz's chest. Embarrassing? What would have been embarrassing? "It was Becky's special day," Martha said, not hiding her irritation. Jason's family and friends were all wonderful people, all successful. Everyone was expected to come as couples. Having you sitting there alone, single and career-focused, would have made everyone uncomfortable. Liz was speechless. Was her career, her independence, and her very existence any embarrassment to her family? "Look, there's no need to worry about it," Martha continued. "It was the most important day of Becky's life. Everything had to be perfect." "Are you saying I'm an imperfect element?" Liz's voice was trembling. "Don't worry about it," Harold interjected. "A wedding is just a ceremony. You weren't invited, but what difference does it make? Your life hasn't changed. You still have your work and your life as always." Liz looked into her father's eyes. In the eyes of the father who once took pride in her and embraced her shoulders, she now could read nothing but indifference. "You're right," Liz said quietly. "My life indeed hasn't changed. But what has become clear is how you view me as family." Liz began walking toward the front door. Martha called after her, "Liz, don't be so sensitive. Becky has always needed special attention. You've always been strong and independent. I'm surprised you're upset over something so small." Liz stopped and turned around. Something small? Her voice was calm, but anger swirled beneath it. Is being excluded from family, having my existence denied, something small? You're overreacting, Martha waved her hand. Anyway, the wedding was wonderful. It cost over $50,000, but it was worth every penny. Liz silently opened the door and stepped outside. The cool night air caressed her heated cheeks. Before getting into her car, she gazed at the warm light visible through the windows of the house. The place where her family belonged, where she was now completely an outsider. Back in her apartment, Liz stared at the Instagram photos again and began to cry uncontrollably. Her family's smiles, the lavish decorations, and the space where she didn't exist. Amidst the mingling sadness and anger, she steeled her resolve. I am no longer a victim, she thought. The next morning, an unexpected knock sounded at her apartment. Opening the door, there stood Becky with a designer bag over her shoulder and a smug smile. Surprise! Becky announced cheerfully. I came to see you. May I come in? Becky took off her shoes and stepped into Liz's apartment before being invited. She was wearing a glossy pink blouse with designer jeans, and a huge diamond ring glittered on her finger. Liz silently opened the door wider to let her sister in. Various emotions were swirling inside her, but she maintained a calm expression. Would you like some coffee? Liz asked flatly. Of course. But decaf, with oat milk if possible, Becky answered as she sat on the sofa in the living room. And no sugar, please, I'm on a post-honeymoon diet. While preparing coffee in the kitchen, Liz took several deep breaths. The humiliating conversation at her parents' house the night before was still etched in her mind. But now, with her sister appearing at her apartment, she thought she might have a chance to uncover the source of her discomfort. It was a lovely party, Liz said in a casual tone as she handed over the coffee. Becky smiled proudly. Yes, it was perfect. Mom and Dad made it such a wonderful wedding. She pulled a glossy wedding album from her handbag. Look. A professional photographer took these. Aren't they wonderful? Liz silently looked through the photos. The solemn ceremony at the church, the lavish reception venue, her parents dancing with smiles, and the happy images of Becky and Jason appeared one after another. But her eyes were fixed on Jason's expression. Something triggered her sense of unease. It was the best day. Becky proclaimed triumphantly. Then, with a malicious smile, she added, something you'll never have, big sister. Those words froze the air. Liz raised her eyes from the photos and stared at her sister. The shadow of the sister she had played with as a child was no longer there. I'm sorry, Liz said quietly. I should feel happy for you, but right now I don't feel anything. Becky sighed. Just as Mom said. You're jealous. Because I'm happily married and you're still single. Jealous? Liz gave a bitter smile. I have no problem with your marriage itself. The problem is that I was excluded as family. The invitation issue? Becky shrugged. Mom told you, didn't she? It was just a change of plans. That's a lie, Liz's voice was cold. I saw the social media posts. The wedding must have been planned months in advance. Becky was momentarily at a loss for words but quickly changed her attitude. Well, if that's the case, then yes. To be honest, Jason and I decided not to invite you. It was a day when all attention should be on us. If you were there, wouldn't the atmosphere have changed? Liz swallowed her words. Instead, she decided to approach from a different angle. Tell me more about Jason. Is his family from New York? Yes, well. Becky answered somewhat vaguely. He does important work at an investment bank. He travels occasionally. Liz checked Jason's face in the photo again. At that moment, a flash of insight struck her. She remembered him attending a museum event several years ago. But his name seemed different then. His work takes him away often? Liz asked. Yes, he's away on business trips 2 or 3 days a week. But that's the secret to success, Becky said proudly. Last week he was in New Jersey. Liz kept this information in mind. She had a friend, Marcus, who worked as a private investigator. He had helped her investigate the authenticity of artworks on occasion. Becky stood up and put her bag over her shoulder. I've got to go now. I have a spa appointment. But I ordered copies of the album and I'll give you one when they're ready. As a memento of our wonderful day. She left with a smug smile. The moment the door closed, Liz's expression changed. She picked up her smartphone and contacted Marcus. The next day, Liz met with Marcus in her office at the museum. I'd like you to investigate an old friend, she explained. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That's unusual. You normally ask me to investigate artworks. This is a personal matter, Liz said with a serious expression. I have an intuition that something is wrong. 3 days later, Marcus contacted her. Your instinct was right, he said. This Jason Foster also uses the name Michael Harris. And he doesn't work at Goldman Sachs. He's an independent investment advisor operating under multiple names. Liz suddenly felt her stomach sink. What else did you find out? He regularly visits a town called Montclair in New Jersey. I'm still investigating what's there. Liz thanked Marcus and asked him to continue his investigation. Over the weekend, she decided to go to Montclair herself. Montclair was a quiet suburban town with many trees. Following the address she had received from Marcus, Liz parked in front of a small colonial-style house. A tricycle and a child's bicycle were placed in front of the house. Liz's heart pounded rapidly. She waited in the car for a while, watching to see what would happen. Around 2 p.m., the door opened, and a small boy and a young woman emerged. The woman was beautiful, with her golden hair tied up. She held the boy's hand and started walking toward the park. Liz instinctively decided to follow them. At the park, the woman directed the child toward the playground equipment and sat down on a bench. Liz approached slowly and sat on the adjacent bench. What a lovely child, Liz smiled as she spoke. Thank you, the woman answered brightly. Aiden is turning 8 soon. The conversation continued naturally, and Liz learned that her name was Samantha. After some small talk, Liz made a decision. Actually, I have something to ask you about your husband, she said slowly. About Michael Harris. Samantha's smile froze. Who are you? Her voice was suddenly filled with wariness. My name is Elizabeth Collins, Liz answered quietly. Last week, my sister married a man named Jason Foster. But I believe he might be the same person as your husband, Michael Harris. Samantha turned pale and silently took out a smartphone from her bag. This man? She turned the screen toward Liz. There was indeed a photo of Jason. Yes, that's him, Liz's voice trembled. Tears welled up in Samantha's eyes. We got married 10 years ago. He always said he had a lot of business trips. Her voice choked. The two spent a long time talking on the park bench. Samantha showed Liz their marriage certificate, the child's birth certificate, and family photos. The evidence was clear. Jason had been living a double life. He always said he spent half the week at his New York office, Samantha said tearfully. Sometimes, he said he had overseas trips as well. They exchanged contact information and promised to share information in the future. Liz received a copy of a family photo from Samantha. It was a picture from Aiden's birthday party, showing Jason embracing his wife and child. This photo was taken just last month, Samantha said. He didn't tell us about his marriage to Becky. He must have planned to continue his double life. During the drive back to New York, Liz's heart was filled with complex emotions. Anger, sadness, and concern for her sister. She knew she had to tell Becky and her parents the truth. But how should she do it? When she returned to her apartment, as expected, there was a message from Becky. I'll visit tomorrow. The wedding album is ready. Liz took a deep breath. Tomorrow, all the truth would be revealed. She placed the photos she had received from Samantha on the table and prepared for the next day. The next afternoon, Becky knocked on the door of Liz's apartment, dressed in glamorous sunglasses and a designer dress. "Delivery," she called cheerfully. Liz opened the door and silently invited her sister in. Her expression was filled with quiet determination. "Coffee? Or wine?" "Wine is fine today," Becky answered brightly. "Married life is the best. Jason is truly the perfect husband. Last night he prepared a special dinner for me." While pouring wine into glasses, Liz was aware of the photos placed on the table. They were still in an envelope. "Here's our wedding album." Becky took out a luxurious leather-bound album from her bag. "Mom ordered it specially. I had a copy made for you too." Liz took the album and quietly turned the pages. Numerous skillfully composed moments of a happy wedding. And on the last page, there was a large photo of Jason kissing Becky. "Can you tell me a bit more about your husband?" Liz asked gently. "Jason?" Becky smiled proudly. "He graduated from Harvard Business School and is very successful in the financial industry. We're about to purchase a luxury condominium in Manhattan once his bonus comes in." "Does he travel often?" "Yes, he's really busy. But that's the mark of a successful man, isn't it?" Becky said, brushing up her hair. "Sometimes I feel lonely, but that's marriage, right?" Liz quietly reached for the envelope on the table. "Becky, there's something I want to show you." "What? A present for me?" Becky said happily. Liz silently took a photo from the envelope and placed it on the table. It showed Jason embracing another woman and a small boy, smiling in front of a birthday cake. Becky's expression changed completely. Her smile froze, and the color drained from her face. What is this?" Her voice was hoarse. "A photo taken last month," Liz answered quietly. "In Montclair, New Jersey." "It's photoshopped," Becky said with a trembling voice. "A fake created by someone trying to frame Jason." "No," Liz's voice was calm but firm. "This is real. This woman is Samantha Harris. She's the wife of Michael Harris, whom she married 10 years ago. And this is Aiden, their son." Becky shook her head violently. "Lies. You don't like my happiness. You're jealous." She took out her smartphone and dialed Jason's number. "Jason? Come here right away. I'm at Liz's apartment. She's saying ridiculous things." From the other end of the phone, Jason's confused voice could be heard. Becky hung up. "He'll be here soon. Then your lies will be exposed." Liz took out more documents from the envelope. "This is the marriage certificate of Samantha and Michael Harris. And this is Aiden Harris's birth certificate. The father's name is Michael Harris." Becky took the documents and flipped through the pages with trembling hands. "These are forgeries," she cried. However, doubt was already seeping into her voice. "Your Jason is actually named Michael Harris, and he's living a double life," Liz continued quietly. "He has a son with Samantha, and he hid that from you." 20 minutes later, the apartment doorbell rang. When Liz opened it, Jason was standing there. His usual confident expression was gone, replaced by an anxious face. "What's going on?" he asked as he entered the room. The moment he saw the photos and documents on the table, his face changed color. "Michael Harris," Liz stared at him intently. "Or Jason Foster. Which is your real name?" "Becky, this is a misunderstanding," Jason turned to his wife. "I can explain." "Explain," Becky's voice was trembling. "What is this photo? Who are this woman and child?" Jason wiped his sweat and began making excuses. "That's my sister and her child. The photo is a bit old and..." "Lies," Liz took out her smartphone. "I met with Samantha yesterday. I have messages and recordings from her." Liz played the recording. Samantha's voice echoed in the room. "Michael and I were married in 2013. He said he worked in New York half the week. Aiden was born in 2016, and Michael is a wonderful father, at least when he's home. The color drained from Jason's face. Becky, I can explain. Becky suddenly slapped his cheek with all her might. A double life for 10 years? You even have a child? Tears of anger filled her eyes. What was our marriage? A lie? I truly love you, Jason said desperately. There was a time when my business failed, and I was in debt. I was planning to end my relationship with Samantha. Planning to end it? Becky's voice became shrill. You were celebrating a birthday with her and your son just last month. In the midst of the confusion, Becky called her parents. Martha and Harold were informed of the emergency and hurried to Liz's apartment. An hour later, the entire Collins family had gathered in Liz's apartment. Martha and Harold's faces showed confusion and anger. We spent over $50,000 on this wedding, Martha said in a trembling voice. And you were already married? Jason tried to continue making excuses, but Liz presented more evidence. This is information gathered by an investigator named Marcus. Jason, you were also involved in real estate investment fraud as Michael Harris. The air in the room froze. Harold hit the chair violently. You deceived my daughter and used our money. Jason suddenly changed his attitude. This is all Liz's fault, he said coldly. She was jealous. That her sister would have a happy marriage. No, Becky said quietly. Liz was trying to protect me. She turned to her sister. I did terrible things to you. I didn't invite you to the wedding. I accused you of being jealous. But you moved to reveal the truth. Martha and Harold looked at Liz with guilty expressions. We owe you an apology too, Martha said, her voice choked. Jason headed toward the exit. Are you satisfied now? You've restored your family bonds, he said sarcastically. But remember, I don't give up easily. This matter isn't over. I'll report you to the police, Liz said calmly. About your fraud activities too. Jason gave a sinister smile and left the room. After silence filled the room, Becky began to cry quietly. Liz didn't hesitate to embrace her sister. We always took you for granted, Martha finally spoke. You were always strong and independent. But that's no reason to exclude you, Harold continued. We had lost you as family. And today, you showed us what true family bonds are. Becky looked at Liz tearfully. You investigated for me and found the truth. Despite how terrible a sister I've been. Liz smiled. You're my sister. That's reason enough. That night, the family spent a long time talking. About past wounds, misunderstandings, and hopes for the future. The cracks in the family were beginning to heal. In the worst of situations, they were trying to become one again. On a spring Sunday 6 months later, flowers were in full bloom in the backyard of her parents' Connecticut home. Liz sat on the terrace, gazing at the garden her father had cultivated with such care. Here's your tea, Martha appeared with a warm cup in hand. Her attitude had lost the arrogance of the past, replaced by gentleness. Thank you, Mom, Liz smiled as she accepted the cup. Martha sat next to her daughter and took a deep breath. I've thought about many things over these 6 months, she said slowly. Especially how unfair I was to you. Liz took her mother's hand. We all make mistakes. You've always met our expectations, Martha continued. And we took that for granted. Using your strength as a reason to ignore your feelings. The terrace door opened, and Becky appeared. She was not in the flashy clothes of before, but in a simple blouse and jeans. A serene expression had returned to her face. We have an hour until counseling time, Becky smiled at her sister. After Jason's double life was exposed, Becky had sunk into deep sadness. With the support of a therapist, she was beginning to show signs of recovery. The divorce proceedings were ongoing, with the final settlement still ahead, but she was trying to reclaim her life. I got an email from Samantha, Becky said quietly. Aiden performed very well in his school presentation. Surprisingly, Becky and Samantha had cultivated a gentle friendship through their common suffering. The two women had come to support each other as victims deceived by a fraudster. What happened with Michael's trial? Liz asked. The verdict will be next month, Harold answered as he came out from the living room. For investment fraud and bigamy, he's likely to get a significant sentence. Jason had been arrested, and his double life had attracted considerable attention. The investigation revealed that he had defrauded multiple women of money. Is David coming? Becky smiled at her sister. Liz's cheeks reddened slightly. Yes, he's picking me up at 7. David Morrison was the museum's new fundraising director, and he and Liz had built an intimate relationship over the past few months. He was a gentle and intellectual man who deeply understood and respected Liz's work and passions. He's really trying to make a good impression on us, Martha smiled. The flowers he brought last week were wonderful. He's a good man, Liz said quietly. But I'm not in a hurry. Your happiness is most important, Harold placed his hand on his daughter's shoulder. We won't impose expectations on you anymore. In the evening, the whole family gathered at the dining table. David joined them, and gentle conversation continued. Liz looked around and felt deep satisfaction. Through tragic events, her family had regained true bonds. Let's make a toast, Harold raised his wine glass. To our family. And especially to Liz. Because your courage and love saved us. The gentle sound of glasses touching resonated in the room. Liz exchanged glances with Becky, and they shared an understanding smile. As sisters, they were feeling a true bond for the first time. Outside the window, the sun was beginning to set on the horizon, announcing the promise of a new day, a new beginning.